Okay, so now you're in my algebra class. And I come in and I say, first of all, I'd like you to know that we're going to do only one thing in this class. It's class in algebra. You're going to think algebraically. And a lot of you think you're not good at math. A lot of you think this is going to be really hard. And a lot of you think it's not going to be pleasant. You're not going to really be able to do it because math is hard, and you always end up not doing too well. I'm here to tell you that all of you already have all you need to know in your mind. You have all the foundations you need to think algebraically. And that algebraic thinking at its roots is extremely simple, not complicated, and you're going to be successful if you want to be. First of all, do you understand what this sentence means? 2 plus 2 equals 3 plus 1. It's a sentence in arithmetic. And now here's the idea behind algebra. What happens if we took a number out and we put a letter in place of the number? And we still did arithmetic, but with a letter in place of the number. Let me give you the idea. Arithmetic with unknowns. That's all algebra is. Arithmetic. If you can do arithmetic, you can do algebra, because that's all you're doing in algebra, is arithmetic with unknowns. Now, when you understand this, you're thinking in arithmetic. Now I transform this by magic into algebra. 2 plus 2 equals 3 plus x. Do you know what x equals? 1. You just thought algebraically. You thought you couldn't do it. You see? It wasn't that hard. Did it hurt? Okay, that's algebraic thinking. Now we can take it a step further. Let's put in 2 letters. 2 plus x equals 3 plus y. Now what does x equal? Well, a little tricky. It all depends on y. So I say y is 10. So what is x? Y is 10. 10 plus 3 is 13. 11. Right? Okay. That wasn't too hard, was it? Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to draw a little table. Put x over here, put y over here. I'm going to give you some x's. Can you figure out the y using this? I'm going to give you some y's. Can you figure out the x's? We're going to work in pairs and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, you're off and running. All we're going to do is arithmetic with unknowns. All we're going to do in the history course is story we tell ourselves to figure out the present and the future. Have an organizing idea. The organizing idea goes right at the essence of the thinking, and then after that it's practice, practice, practice. You never leave the organizing idea. This is something that's perfectly possible, but teachers haven't taught their subject that way. There are people who have been teaching algebra for years and have never noticed that it was arithmetic with unknowns and never taught it that way. And so, of course, then the students can't learn it that way. And how many of you who took history had history presented in the way that I presented it? I took a lot of history. Nobody presented it that way. History was remembering lots of stuff from the history book. That was what history was. Well, that's not historical thinking. That's not why we have history in the curriculum. It's not the point. So what students did had little relationship to the point in the first place. Okay, so this is part of the macro level. Now let's go back for a minute to what is universal. There are universal elements in thinking. All thinking has a purpose. All thinking focuses on questions. All thinking requires information. All thinking makes assumptions. All thinking comes to conclusions. All conclusions have implications. All thinking exists within a point of view. That's the elements of thought. So now you bring that into history. We look at historical purposes, historical question, historical information, historical interpretations, historical assumptions, da-da-da-da-da. We're looking at literature. Look at literary purposes, literary problems, information from the text or the story, literary interpretations, and so forth and so on. Now the student is in a literature class and in a history class and in an algebra class. And what are they hearing in all the classes? Make your purpose clear, What is the fundamental question? What is the question on the floor? Everyone's identifying the question on the floor. What information do we need? They're focusing on information. Then they're moving to the level of interpretation, and they see this right across the curriculum. I mean, imagine a school like this. There's not a single school in the country like this, but there could be. And if there was, I'd love to go to it, because you'd really learn well, and you'd be transferring all over the place. Because there are these universal structures, but what's the problem? The teachers don't know them. There are universal standards, but what's the problem? Teachers don't know them. There are organizing ideas for every subject. The problem, the teachers don't know them. Not that they can't know them, no problem with their neocortex. They have all the brain power they need. They weren't taught this way. And we teach the way we were taught. So what do we have to? We have to rethink our teaching. Now, when we're doing this, then, think of students assessing their own work. The elements give a certain program in assessment. Here's the program in assessment. What's our purpose? What's the question at issue? That's part of the program in assessment. Now, let me show you how I bring it into an assignment where students assess their work. I give them an assignment. It could be printed up, or I could explain it. This is what I want you to do. Then I say, okay, there are 4 parts to all of my assignments. The first part is restate the assignment in your own words. Okay, why? Because you can monitor then to what degree you understand what I said. And you can read what you wrote to the person next to you and see if you wrote the same thing. I mean, suppose you write out what you took the assignment to be, and you took it to have 2 parts. They wrote it out, and they took it to have 3 parts. And obviously, we're not on the same wavelength. We can clarify that. So, restate the assignment in your own words. Secondly, state the purpose of the assignment. Why do you think we're doing this? Thirdly, state the main question we're trying to answer here. Fourthly, do the assignment. So now, by bringing that in, I both model the thinking I want and have some tools for assessing the thinking. But of course, I'm not going to assess it, they're going to assess it. So I have them trade papers, and then have each one explain what they thought the purpose was. Then we can have a general discussion of what the purpose of the assignment was. Or I call on different people to state the question that they think was in the assignment. And so let's say I gave the assignment, and then people did this. What do you think would happen when I said, okay, so George, what do you think the main question here is in this assignment? And George gives it. And then I say, Eleanor, what did you write? And then I say, okay, Martha, what did you write? Would all the questions be identical? No. They'd hear different questions. So then we'd come back to them and say, okay, now we got 3 versions of the question. Let me give the assignment again. And we're going to talk about the question that it's raising. So what are we doing now? We're clarifying together. We're learning how to be more precise. We're learning how to frame questions. We're learning how to take instructions and pull the question out of the instructions. We're learning to distinguish the important from the unimportant. And we're doing this in a way where I carry no papers home. I have nothing to grade. They're doing it together with me in class. How do I know how they're doing? I wander through while they're doing it. I listen. And you can wander through the class. If they're going to do this for 10 minutes, you wander through listening to what they're saying. You hear some people on target, some people off target, and it guides you then when you come back to the class and give feedback to the class or conduct your general discussion. So what am I saying? The elements of thinking, each element of thinking provides something that can be assessed, and assessed over and over again. Here's an element in thinking, implication. Thinking always has implications. When you say this, it implies that. If you say you have information, that implies one thing. If you say you have knowledge, that implies another. If you say that somebody's clever, that implies one thing. If you say they're cunning, that implies something else. If you say it's education, that implies one thing. If you say it's training, that implies something else. Do you know what you're implying when you say this? Let's think about this. What does this imply? What does this line of the poem imply? What does this line in the text imply? What does this melody imply for the structure of the symphony? So we look for implications. We're always looking for, what does this lead to? This leads to this, leads to that. And so we do this again and again, and we have the students check the implications. They have to assess, think, make judgments about implications.